Hello everyone, and welcome to the second part of the Basic CMS 1500 form completion. This form we're going to focus on blocks 14 through 33. So once again, make sure you have your printed instructions if you need that block by block instructions, and have your scenario handy. So previously, you should have completed blocks 1 through 13. This section, blocks 14 through 33, is going to focus on the physician or the supplier information. More specifically, this is where we're going to look at that encounter information. Okay, so block 14. This is going to be the date of illness, injury, or the last menstrual period. Okay, so if it's an illness or injury, we're going to type in the date that the patient's coming in. So let's say, for example, they're coming in today because they had an injury. Okay, then we would type that information directly in. Now, on this right-hand side of block 14, you see where it says QUAL. That represents qualifier. This is to let the claims processors know whether we're using illness or injury or last menstrual period. If we're using the date of illness or injury, we're going to put qualifier 431 in this block. If we're using last menstrual period, then we will put 484. Block 15, this is going to be other dates associated with block 14. So this could be initial treatment, accident x-ray, prescription, report start, report end, first visitor consultation. If you do not have an additional date, you're going to leave this block blank. Now, block 16, this is where we're talking about the patients when they're unable to work. So this is going to be the from and the to date. Okay, so remember that the to date is going to be that last day that patient is unable to work. So if they are able to return to work on July 1st, the to date would be June the 30th. Okay, if you don't have this information, then you're going to leave it blank. Next, in block 17, this is going to be the name of the referring provider. Okay, the first thing is on the left-hand side of this dotted line is where we would signify what type of provider. Was it a referring provider? Was it an ordering provider? Was it a supervising provider? If we're putting in for a referring provider, we would put the abbreviation DN. And then in the spot to the right of that double line, we would type in their name and credentials. Now, this is going to be first name, then last name, then credentials. Okay. Over here on block slightly to the right of that, it's 17A and 17B. 17B is where we would type in their NPI number. This should be located in the additional information at the very bottom of your scenario form if there's one provided. 17A, this would only be used if we're using something other than a provider's NPI. Okay, so this would be if we're using a state's license number, a UPIN number, a commercial number, okay? 9 times out of 10, you are going to be using the physician's NPI number because you'll be working with a physician. Now, block 18, this is referring to if the patient was hospitalized. If they were hospitalized, then we're going to put the dates that they were admitted and for the from date, and the to date would be the day they were discharged. Block 19, we leave blank. This is once again reserved for NUCC use. Block 20, this is one block that needs to be filled out on every single form. Okay, was an outside lab used? If the answer is yes, then you'll put an X in the yes box. And then to the right of that, where it says charges, you need to put the amount that was billed from that outside lab. 9 times out of 10, you are going to be putting no. Okay, this would count if you're doing it in hospital, if you're doing it in the physician's office, then we would mark no. Now, block 21, this is where you're going to have your information about the encounter. Okay, this is where we put the patient's diagnosis codes. So there's 2 parts here. So first, on the right-hand side above the letter D is your ICD indicator. This is to indicate which version of ICD we're using. If you're using ICD-10, you're going to put a 0 in there. If you're using ICD-9, which nobody should be at this point, it went obsolete October 1st, 2015, then you'll put a 9. Okay, so almost everybody is going to be putting that 0 there. Not an O, a 0. Then in blocks A through L, this is where we are going to be listing the diagnosis codes. Okay, remember your first listed diagnosis, the reason that patient came in is always going to go in letter A. Okay, and you just type in the code. Then you will go to B, C, D. Don't make the mistake of going A, E, L. Okay, it needs to go A, B, C, D, alphabetical order. Block 22. This is going to be used if we have a resubmission code. If we do have a resubmission code, we would enter it there on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, we would put in that original reference number. Okay, block 23. This is where if we had the procedure or the encounter required a pre-authorization. This is where we would enter that number in. Now we're moving down to block 24. Okay, as you can see, block 24 has A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J. We're going to go through each individual ones. You can also see on the left-hand side that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, this is where we're going to put in order our CPT and HCPCS codes. Now, your line 1 should always be your evaluation and management code. Okay, if you have multiple evaluation management codes, then you're going to put them in order by the date. If it's all for one visit, you should only have one evaluation management code. You might have additional CPT codes, but 2 through 6 will go in the order of charges, or column F. So if we have a patient coming in and they're sick for today, and we're always going to type in the white portion of this, okay, unless for some reason we get to I and J and we're using a non-MPI number, but otherwise we always stay in the white portion of the form. So this would be the same date that we entered up in block 14. And here we can just do the 2-digit year. If it's a same day occurrence, we do not need to put that to date in. However, if we are having a situation where the patient is there for multiple days, then we would need to make sure we put that to date in. Your place of service code, typically this is going to be either 11 for office or 21 for hospital. However, there is a full list of codes that can be used. So this occurred in the office, so we're going to put it as 11. Now, block C is for emergency. Was this an emergency? If it was, then we mark yes. If it wasn't, then we mark no. And technically, if it's no, we can just leave it blank. We don't have to put N in there. Next is going to be your CPT codes, okay? So if this patient was a level 3 established office visit, that code would be 99213, okay? So we would put in this column D, the first code, like I said, should be that E&M code, that evaluation management code. Every additional code for lines 2 through 6 will go in the order of charges. If we have any modifiers, we will put those in the space next to it, and then we'll move on to column E. Okay, this is where we're going to link that CPT code with that ICD code. So the reason this patient came in today was for that ICD code of I-10 or hypertension. So all we are going to do is type the letter that corresponds. Okay, now on your instructional or your scenario sheet, you do have the charges that are listed with each code. So you would just type the corresponding charges in here, and you'll use this dotted line as your decimal point. You're not going to type a decimal point in. Now, days or units, you will always have days or units. It might just be a quantity of 1, but this always needs to be filled in, okay? If you have block H, this is typically used for Medicaid. With this is going to be for early and periodic screening, diagnosis and treatment, or family planning. We'll discuss about that when we do the video on Medicaid. 24H and 24I. Or 24I is going to be if the physician doesn't, or if the provider doesn't have an MPI number, and then we would fill this in the gray area. Since the physician does have an MPI number, we're going to go ahead and we do not need to fill anything in block I, and we're going to move on to block J. And this is where we'll type that MPI number for that physician that worked with that patient. Okay. If we have multiple items, then we will just continue to do the same thing. So they had an EKG done. Now, once we're done filling everything out in this area, we're going to move down to block 25. 9 times out of 10, the physician is going to use their EIN number. This is issued by the IRS, so instead of using their social security number. But we need to still mark that that's what we used. And then we would type in their number. Now, the patient's account number, that's going to be our own medical record number. We can put punctuation in there because that's for our record. That has nothing to do with the claim. Now, if that physician is a participating provider, then they automatically accept assignment. That means they accept whatever that physician or whatever that insurance company states is payment as payment in full. Now, this does not include the patient's portion if they owe a deductible, if they owe a co-insurance, a co-payment, anything like that. But it's saying whatever the amount, the allowed amount for that contract is payment in full. Okay, so if they are a participating provider, we are automatically going to mark yes. If they're a non-participating provider, we can still mark yes. There might be a reduction in fees, or we can mark no. Now, block 28, all we are going to do is add up columns, or all the charges within column F. So this equals $100. Remember that dotted line is your decimal point. If the patient paid anything towards this, so let's say they had a $20 copay, we would type that in. Block 30, we're going to leave blank. This is reserved for NUCC use. Okay, now block 31, this is where the physician needs to sign. This can be signed by the provider, and it needs to include credentials. Some contracts will allow for signature on file, for the use of a stamp. For all assignment purposes, just type the provider's name and credentials in the space provided. So it'll be Irma, and this will be found once again at the top of your instructions. And then the date. Okay. Now, block 32, this is going to be used if we have a different facility than where we were billing from. So for example, a patient was seen in the office, but they did a procedure at the hospital, and that's what we're billing for. Then the hospital information would go here in block 32, and the office information would go in block 33. However, if it was all done in the same location, then we do not need to fill in block 32. We can just skip and go to block 33. Now, you'll see that there is a spot for the phone number. Once again, no punctuation. Okay, and then you would type out the address, the billing address with the physician's name. Make sure to spell out drive, no abbreviations. And once again, you can use that hyphen if you have that 9-digit zip code. Now, the last thing that we need to fill out on this form is going to be block 33A. And this is where that facility's NPI number is going to go. Okay, every facility, every clinic, every durable medical equipment, every provider has an NPI number. So if you have to fill out 32, for example, for the hospital, make sure you pull that information for that facilities. Okay. And now you've completed a full CMS 1500 form.